Pete here with the Small Business Resource Center and the Small Business Resource Center YouTube channel with an important update on the stimulus package. Mark Meadows in the White House has just announced a $1.9 trillion stimulus package. So the Republicans and Trump are increasing the stimulus package to try to get something passed. Let me explain all the details of what's been going on the last couple days. It looks like basically over the weekend on ABC News, Nancy Pelosi had an interview. During the interview, she blamed the fact that the Republicans were not being transparent with testing and tracing, and that's why they're not passing the stimulus package. So, well, check out the video. Here's the news clip.
And that's where we begin with our first guest, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Madam Speaker, thank you for joining us this morning. I want to get to the latest on the stimulus negotiations with the White House. But first, your reaction to that new salvo from President Trump last night. Governor Whitmer said this is exactly the kind of rhetoric that has put me, my family, and the lives of other government officials in danger.
Yeah. The president has to realize that the words of the President of the United States weigh a ton. And in our political dialogue, to inject fear tactics into it, especially a woman governor and her family, is so irresponsible. And in all fairness to people who listen to him, people think the president is important and what he says should be adhered to. And so we have this horrible situation, but the people have awakened to him. 26 million people already voting. The biggest antidote to his poison is the vote.
A lot of Americans are hurting, as you know, as well, Madam Speaker. I know you've been negotiating with the White House over a possible economic relief package, and you spoke with Secretary Mnuchin last night. Yes. Any closer to reaching a deal?
Well, we're seeking clarity because actually, with all due respect to some of the people in the president's administration, they're not legislators. So when they said we're accepting the language on testing, for example, and we're just making a light touch, they said, they changed shall to may, requirements to recommendations, a plan to a strategy, not a strategic plan. They took out 55% of the language that we had there for testing and tracing. And the tracing part is so important because communities of color have been disproportionately affected by this. So on this subject where we have agreement, we don't have agreement in the language yet, but I'm hopeful. And here's the big difference. Communities of color have more deaths than the white population. And let's just think of this. If you are a child, a Hispanic child has 8 times more chance of going to the hospital with COVID than a white child. A black child, 5 times more chance of going to the hospital than that. That's because we have not addressed the problem. The testing, the tracing, the treatment, the mask wearing, the separation, the sanitation, and all that goes with it. So again, hopefully that we can learn from each other and they understand. Let me just say this. We had pages and pages of how you would do this in the minority community. They crossed it all out. Instead, they put this sentence. Contact tracing will be paid for by the federal government as part of the $75 billion. Okay, we agree with that. But given state difference, each state shall establish a strategy that is appropriate to its circumstances. CDC can provide guidance to the states on elements. Can, no, must. But in addition to that, we have to have a national plan. You cannot leave it up to the states
so if you
decide
don't,
how they're going to address the minority community.
If you don't get that agreement, if you don't get that agreement in the 48-hour deadline, you said, what happens?
Well, here's the thing. The 48 only relates to if we want to get it done before the election, which we do.
Well, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, so which we do. But we're saying to them, we have to freeze the design on some of these things. Are we going with it or not? And what is the language? I'm optimistic because, again, we've been back and forth on all of this. You know legislation. Shall is different from may. And the difference amounts to this. If you think of it this simple way, when you say may, you're giving the president a slush fund. He may do this, he may grant, he may withhold. When you say shall, according to the science tell us, must happen. And if we test and trace and treat, mask, separate, ventilate, sanitize, and all the rest of that, we can open our schools.
But
we
Madam
can
Speaker,
open our businesses.
Even if you reach a deal with the White House somewhere around $1.82 trillion, Leader McConnell has said he's not going to put something like that on the floor of the Senate. So what happens?
Well, he said a number of things. And one of the things that he said, I think it was yesterday, but it was reported yesterday, that is if the White House and the House come to an agreement, that he would put it on the floor. That is among his many statements. But most of the time he spends laughing, pushing the pause button, telling states to go bankrupt, laughing when in his debate, did you see that? When Amy McGrath was saying to him, what are you doing about stopping the spread of the virus, et cetera? He laughed. He laughed. This is not funny. The president didn't take it seriously. McConnell has not taken it seriously. But we can stop this if we follow the science and be ready for a vaccine, which I hope will be soon.
You haven't spoken to the president in over a year. Are you willing to pick up the phone to close the deal, to get this done?
Look, let me just say this, because I keep getting that question. It isn't about the president. He sends his representative. President Bush sent his representative. President Obama sent their representative. Professionals who know something about the policy. This is not unusual. However, I have a great deal of respect for the office I hold, Speaker of the House, and I have a great deal of respect for the position that he holds, President of the United States. This is not a casual conversation. This is about a meeting of the head of the first branch of government, the legislative branch, and the president. If there is a purpose, if there is a stipulation of trying to get something done, then perhaps we take this to that place when we can't solve other problems. But many of you have spent many times calculating how many times the president has misrepresented the facts, how many times the president has told me and told Chuck Schumer that, yes, we're going to do this for Dreamers, or told bipartisan, bicameral representatives in the Congress, yes, we're going to do this on immigration, told us, yes, we're going to do this on infrastructure, but then he doesn't. So again, you want to meet with him, you meet with him. But as far as I'm concerned, the Speaker of the House must be respected in terms of what the purpose of the meeting is, what the preparation is for it, and what the likely outcome of success would be.
Bottom line, Madam Speaker, are Americans going to get relief before Election Day? Well,
that depends on the administration. The fact is that the heart of the matter is to stop the spread of the virus. Now, let me speak to you from the standpoint of children, because that is my why. That is why I am in government and politics. For the children, we're having a big debate with them now over earned income tax credit. They get a tax break to the richest people in America. We want a earned income tax credit, child tax credit, child independent tax credit for the children, 6 to 8 million, depending on whose calculation you use. Million kids are now, people are in poverty in our country, and many of them are children. So this will take millions of children out of poverty, send them to schools that take money to have the separation, the ventilation, of the number of teachers there to teach them, have correct this coronavirus that is affecting Black and Hispanic children in a much greater way than white kids. And that takes us all back to state and local government, which is the source of health care, education, first responders, police and fire, food, sanitation, and the rest. There's a oneness to this. I think we can get there. But if you think of it in terms of the children and child care, they're rejecting our number on child care, which is greatly reduced, but they're rejecting it, saying child care is people can't go to work if their children can't go to school.
Finally, Madam Speaker, I do have to move on, but I just want to ask you one final question about Judge Amy Coney Barrett. Last time we spoke, you said Democrats had arrows in their quiver to block this nomination, but she seems like she's on a path to confirmation right now. Is this a done deal, or is there still something Democrats can do to stop it?
Well, we'll see. I'm not in the Senate. I don't. What I'm talking about is how we win this election, because we have to offset whatever the outcome of this, whatever this court may do. And the Congress of the United States can overturn these bad decisions. For example, the court just did one on the census. The census is a disagreement we have in this bill. This is very important, who we are as a nation, and yet the court just agreed with the president to stop the census. So again, because we want to have an agreement, we can come to negotiation, and we can do it now. What's the difference, a few days, except that we could have it before the election, which we want it as soon as possible. And I certainly want it, because I don't want to have to be sweeping up after this dumpings of this elephant as we go into a new presidency in a few short months.
Madam Speaker, thank you for your time this morning.
So the Republicans are basically saying there's a $500 million gap, or billion-dollar gap, excuse me, on the House Democrats' plan and the plan that they currently proposed. So when you're looking at that, Nancy Pelosi said there's a deadline of Tuesday, which was 48 hours to pass a stimulus package to get stimulus checks and funding to people before the election. So when you're looking at that and saying that, I guess the White House and Mark Meadows decided to be proactive, and they announced a $1.9 trillion package. So they're increasing their offer. When you're looking at that, Nancy Pelosi, as you can see in the video, has also stated that the state government, they need to be more transparent and follow CDC guidelines, and I have to try to just interject myself and say, well, this doesn't make sense. You're not following the CDC guidelines when it comes to governors doing what they want and imposing their own rules and restrictions that are prohibiting businesses from opening and prohibiting people from going back to work. But you want them to follow the CDC guidelines when it comes to getting a lot of money for testing and tracing. And you're saying the states need to follow the federal guidelines. So I always see this with a lot of things, and I shouldn't be laughing because this is all of our lives on the line. We're almost like pawns, if you ask me. But when you're looking at it, they want state governments to follow federal regulations for testing and tracing, and saying states should not make their own regulations. And then when it comes to the federal CDC guidelines for opening up, they do not want that. They want the governors to make their own rules. So just put it there. The only thing I see as a positive when you're looking at the video, of course, is Nancy Pelosi said that the people are not getting enough money. I can agree with that a little bit. There's a lot of people probably struggling a lot more and could use some more assistance because their job has been reduced quite a bit, or their businesses are being shut down. And that does go to, of course, some increased stimulus. It also goes with the SBA loosening standards on getting people approved for the EDIL and the PPP. Of course, if you have seen my channel, you'll realize that I've been stating that the PPP is too low. $100,000 income limit does not fit the needs for a lot of self-employed business people. So you're looking at a lot of business people who make well over $100,000, and the PPP loan is for a $100,000 cap. And some people do have jobs with incomes over $100,000. So I'm not really sure how they came up with that number, but that's the number they've been using. So just try to treat everybody fairly when I'm speaking about that. So of course Nancy said there is a 48-hour deadline to get the stimulus checks and packages approved. That would be Tuesday. And I will have a link in the original video. Jerome Powell basically said that we need to get people more stimulus, and of course now Mark Meadows is proposing on behalf of the White House a $1.9 trillion stimulus package. So I'm hoping that this gets approved. Well, I'm not really sure what's in it, but I guess this is the common ground. They start at 1.5, now at 1.9. House Democrats at 2.2. So what do you think? Oh, I forgot one thing. China, actually two things. China has actually also stated about a week ago to prepare for war. And now today, China has also stated that they will take American hostages if Chinese spies are not released or charges aren't dropped by the Department of Justice. I long time said that maybe one day we're going to have a war with China. I, of course, don't want war with China, but when I see looming problems and threats, that's where I have a suggestion or maybe forethought and say, well, this sounds like it could be a strong possibility. So it's one thing to consider. I don't know your thoughts or comments, but have a great day. Comment below. Let me know your thoughts. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. I update as soon as possible and try to answer all the questions that you have for whatever help you need. And if you're returning, welcome back. It's Pete. So we'll have a Tuesday update. Have a great day.